afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the City Chatter Podcast. I'm John Bernstrom, Public Information Officer for the City of Grand Forks, and your host of the City Chatter Podcast for the City of Grand Forks. And joining me today, outgoing City Council member from Ward 3, Bret Weber. Bret, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, John.
You asked me when you came in, you're like, why am I on here? And you're like, we got 12 years of business to talk about
Okay, good.
So let's get right into it. You've had to make this decision a few times. You first ran in 2012 and got elected. So that means you ran 3 other times, correct? 12 years?
2 other times.
2 other times. Besides, the decision-making process and when it comes up to, do I want to run again? Do I want another 4 years? What for you, what goes through your head in that decision-making?
The first time, I think that you run for your second term. It's part of serving.
Mm-hmm.
But then the third term, I was not planning on running, and I started a year or 2 before trying to find someone to consider running, and I didn't come up with anyone, and ended up running again. But I for 2 or 3 years before that, I'd been saying I was not going to run. This time, I was quite sure that 3 terms that was enough. 12 years is good. I don't think that we should have term limits, but people should also recognize when it's their time. Yeah.
Well, and along those lines, maybe not term limit. Like you felt it, like internally. It sounds like just like, okay, this feels right. So Tricia Berg is now in Ward 3. She won the election. Taking
quite
over your
handily.
Ward. She's now your council member.
She is, yes.
What do you know about Tricia? Have you crossed paths with her before? I've met her once. I'll meet her more here in the future. What do you know about the new Ward 3 council member?
We are both social workers. She works in child welfare. I've worked a little bit in child welfare. I've worked in other areas of social work. She was a student in class many years ago.
Your class?
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
In fact, one of the classes that I teach as a professor at UND is social policy. And one of the nice fits of my day job and my council position was that I was teaching about policy in the classroom, and then I was acting as a policymaker and working in the policy sphere. So being able to combine those two was a great opportunity for me. A number of students over the years. Kylie Overson.
Oh, sure. Yep.
Katie Dockler
Mm-hmm.
was a student. And probably some others that I'll need to remember. But and I've mentioned individuals who have run for office, who have served in office. Jackie Hofarth is another. But one of the great rewards of my day job is helping to train this new generation of social workers and then get to work with them in the community, whether it's in elected office or at various agencies. So
interesting with the one time I met Ms. Berg, she was talking about her work working with the legislature in her job, some policy, I shouldn't say policy boards, but like the city legislative team that we have just
Right.
for her job. And then it's interesting to hear the you were that person for us with city council, and then the class you taught. Just there's the local level of legislation, if you will. Then there's the locals got to work with the state and vice versa, and the feds. Can you talk a little bit? You didn't start on the legislative committee for the city of Grand Forks when you started on city council, correct? That wasn't until your second term.
no, actually, and this is coming up July 1st. Each new council has to constitute themselves.
That's right.
And they figure out who's going to serve on what committee, et cetera. And so as a freshman council member, you're given this list and you're asked, are you interested in any of these? And to some extent, it feels like that's already been sort of decided for you, but it's also, you're now a member of the club. And so you get to indicate your interests. And I think that it had been Mr. Christensen had been the chair of the legislative committee prior to 2012.
Mm-hmm.
He was no longer interested in it, And when Ken Vian and I were looking at the list, we were both immediately very interested in that. And so Ken and I co-chaired for the first 6 to 8 years. I think that maybe he was still official co-chair, but he'd gotten busy with his work out at Medora.
Stepped away a little bit, yeah.
So the last 2 or 3 sessions, and this was work that you and I did very closely, because there's a lot of time that goes into that each week during the session. I frequently would apologize, more or less, to the department heads. I said, look, every one of you knows more about what we're going to be talking about here than I do. And yet it's my job to kind of organize this meeting, run the meeting. You and Todd let me feel like I was running the meeting, and then to be the official voice for the decisions being made by that committee. Even though it was you on a weekly basis who was giving the report, then it was kind of, okay, Bret, is there anything else to mention? No, I give my official, yes, John did, nice work, John. But you put in hours and hours each week tracking dozens of bills. Sometimes you'd be tracking probably over 100 bills during a session. There'd be, 20 or 30 that we'd have as priorities that we were watching more closely, often offering testimony on and helping to shape state law through the legislative committee of the third largest city in the state, but one of the more powerful voices in terms of the legislative action. Other cities are not always as collaborative and close as we are. Team Grand Forks, we have this great collaboration between the Chamber, UND, the Airport Authority, the county school district, and in many ways the city was a leader on that.
In a nice way, it's a compliment to the work we do here in Grand Forks. There's a conference coming up, a communications conference, people like me in the state of North Dakota, and they're doing a legislative panel because there's a legislative session coming up in League of Cities, Association of Counties. And I got asked to be on it because they're just like, well, Grand Forks does it this way, and it works. And I think about your time on legislative committee. We built a water treatment plant. That was
$150 million water treatment plant that'll last for the next century, probably.
And I had Ken in this chair here a few weeks ago, and we've talked Red River Valley water supply for every session.
Decades, right?
But now you can almost see an ending, which is amazing considering how large that project is.
Right.
That I asked Ken about it, and he's like, well, I suppose. And I'm like, no, that's got to feel pretty good.
Yeah. We were lucky to have Ken on the council for many reasons, but especially because of his knowledge around water issues and his statewide recognition as an expert in that area.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. Okay, so 12 years on a Grand Forks City Council, 2 council chambers. Hey, way to make it to the new council chamber.
I made it to the new chambers. Nice. I finally got a new chair. It was good. It took 11 years.
Took 11 years, chairs. Right? Because your first day on council, you're like, boy, I really like a new chair. But this is, I know this is going to be a difficult question. Do you have highlights? I mean, it's 12 years worth. I mean, there's how many meetings? There's 50 meetings a year and all that stuff. But highlights in those 12 years as
wow,
city
so
council.
About 600 meetings.
Yeah.
Plus legislative committee meetings.
Or other committees.
And
Growth
all
fund.
of the other growth fund, the various boards, and et cetera. So, yeah, there's a fair bit of work. Highlights. Well, I remember getting on the council in 2012. And the city council at that time, let's see, it included a number of individuals, but Hal Gershman, Doug Christensen, Kurt Kruin, some of they were the leadership.
Right.
And those were folks who had played key roles in helping the city emerge from the 1997. And so one of the awesome responsibilities that we felt at that time was they've done this great job. Part of our job is to not screw it up.
No.
And I think that here in 2024, the flood for many folks is further removed and isn't as immediate as it was when I first moved to Grand Forks in 2005. It was the first thing people told you was their flood story. It was still very much alive in people's memories.
It was scary and unifying at the same time.
Yes, yes.
You have a story, I have a story. How did you get through that? Oh, I did the same thing. I had to clean out my basement. You had to clean out. We're a generation away from that now.
We're a generation away from that now. And there's been, over $1 billion of investment in the community. Not federal investment, well, there's federal dollars as well, but $1 billion of investment just in the last 5-6 years. We're seeing this shift from having survived the flood to now really thriving and moving into a new stage in the city's history.
So forgive the background. There's a daycare
That's
in this
great.
building.
That's wonderful.
And
yeah.
there's I think there's a game of tag going on out there.
Okay, good.
So
We may have to take a break.
we may have to take a break. No, that's all right. I will say this is you're exactly right. You came onto a council with Hal Gershman, Kirk Kroon, Elliot Glassheim.
Well, Elliot was Ward 3, so I was,
you
yes.
replaced Elliot, but that generation of council members,
I tried to fill Elliot's shoes. I didn't replace Elliot. I
they
tried to
were
fill his
the
shoes.
flood recovery council, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
and then it transitions to, all right, how do we? We're no longer recovering. We have recovered, and I think it took some time as a council, a mentality of a community, if you will, of we're recovered, we can move on. To the things we're seeing now of, hey, let's talk about quality of life. Let's talk about a children's museum. Let's talk about indoor turf and aquatics. It's easy to say, but you need the community almost to shift through that, don't you?
You do, and there's this sense that elected officials have to listen to the people. Well, it's a difficult thing because you've got people shouting from different directions,
Correct.
and often the majority are not shouting.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a responsibility to represent the people, but also to provide leadership, and that's a tension that you're always trying to weigh. And
Let alone your own opinion, which is
Right.
part of that equation.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's part of your role as an elected official. But elected officials come and go. The people who keep the city together are the bureaucrats.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up thinking that a bureaucrat was a bad word, that those were bad people. And very early on, when you get involved in this kind of work, you come to understand that the bureaucrats are the ones who keep everything together. And over that 12 years, the amount of respect that I've learned and gained about the bureaucrats, the city staff, has been one of the major lessons of the 12 years. And when I think back to city staff 12 years ago, there was a sense that, oh no, we have a number of people retiring and we're going to lose a wealth of institutional knowledge. And that was the concern in 2012, 2013. And over those next several years, we didn't so much lose institutional knowledge as gained a whole bunch of new energy and new ideas while maintaining a consistency. And that's been a really important lesson that I hope that people would be aware of. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the late Bob Brooks was the Ward 1 council member in the early 2000s.
Okay.
It was in the time when Mr. Phelan was up for the city administrator job. And this happens in council meetings sometimes. It's all right, we're going to start making sausage, right? And the contract says this. And Bob got up there and he goes, we need to stop doing this. We need to stop doing this. He goes, none of us are a city administrator. He goes, the staff and everything, they have to meet qualifications, whether it's education or work history or anything like that. He goes, as a council member, I have one qualification. I need one more friend than the person I'm running against. He goes, that's the only qualification that got me in this chair. And it was one that kind of reset the council. They're just like, you know what, you're right. You're right. We can help along the way, and everyone has different backgrounds and stuff like that. Like you said, you talked about Mr. Ken Vienard. I have an infrastructure question. I'm going to give Ken a call. right? Stuff like that. But I thought Mr. Bob Brooks said that pretty well. He goes, I just have one more friend.
But the democratic system requires that voice of the people. So
Yes.
whoever has one more friend, they get to add their voice to the decision-making
They do.
process.
They also represent the people that voted against them too.
And they do, right? And have a responsibility to them as well. But in doing that, we have to depend upon the expertise, the knowledge, and the even-handedness and objectivity of the city staff, the bureaucrats. I have just always been so impressed at how objective city staff are. They have always been very nice to me, open door. Anything I've asked for, they've gone out of their way to make available to me. And in fact, I had to learn to quit asking for things because I could inadvertently send someone off to do a whole bunch of work. I thought I had some small question, and somebody would go. Maureen would spend I don't know how many hours working up detailed spreadsheets to answer what I thought had been a very simple question, and then I realized how complicated it was. But city staff, regardless of what our interests were, what our positions were, if we asked for information, it was presented to us, and we were all treated very even-handedly and objectively. Yeah.
Good. No, that's good to hear.
And you've been there the whole 12 years. How long have you been there?
I'm coming up here in a month on 18 years.
On 18. Okay.
18 years. Yes, that's from my children's standpoint. They've only known me having this one job.
Right.
I have people approach me, having worked in television. I'll have people approach me about that job, and my kids look at me like, "What
job?
What did you do?
Yes.
Who are these people, and why do they know you?" So it's kind of funny, but yeah, 18 years, which means I made the decision to get married and change jobs in a 1-week span.
Okay.
So I'm coming
It's
up.
an important week. Funny the way life works that way.
That was a big week.
Yes.
Big week. Yeah. So this happens every once in a while. What your answer is here today. Not that I'm not going to trust you, but we'll see what happens in the future. Are you done with public office?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, 4 years ago, I thought I was done with public office. And 6 years ago, I was saying, I'm done with public office. Will I run for office again? Probably not. But once you're involved in the community at this level, you don't just walk away. You continue to be involved. I will continue to serve on various boards and committees, and we'll see. Mr. Malm passed away just a few days ago, and his obituary had a long list of his service in our community, and it was an incomplete list. There were committees that I was on with Gary Malm.
Yep.
He was on so much more than what you could fit in a single obituary. I don't have any kind of career like Gary Malm, but I hope that I know that in various capacities I'll continue to be involved in the community, and it's hard to guess or hard to predict what else might happen. But I don't see myself running for office again.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you stick in Grand Forks for a little bit.
Well, thanks, John.
Grand Forks is better for it.
It's
Appreciate
great. I kind of missed winter this last year.
I didn't.
I love the winters here. All that beautiful sunshine, and I like to get out there. So I was a little disappointed with winter this year. So I'm looking forward to next year.
And winter's one of those interesting. You talk about you hear from both sides, right? I heard this from council members across the board. Snowmobile discussion, right? At council meetings,
Right.
all you heard was people of, why don't you let snowmobiles on the greenway? Hearing from council member, all you heard not at council meetings was, don't let snowmobiles in the greenway. I'm oversimplifying that, but I'm using that as an example of
Right.
If people.
How do we listen to the people?
How do you listen to the people when you're hearing both?
Are we listening to the 6 people shouting at us week after week?
Right.
And it wasn't just supporters of snowmobiles. There were a lot of people who came and testified about keeping snowmobiles off the greenway as well.
Well, they did.
But
right.
you're right. I think
it's both
most
sides,
of the
though.
voices that I heard in the community when I was at the grocery store, the hardware store, and people would come up to me, almost universally, those folks were telling me to keep them on.
Right.
And I spend a lot of time on the greenway, so I was seeing people on the Greenway coming up and saying, keep them off, keep the snowmobiles off.
As simple as an issue as snowmobiles on the green, and I'm simplifying it here, as that was a great example of, well, just because you're saying it doesn't mean they have to listen, because they as council members are hearing it just as much from the other side as well, to where you as a council member gets put in a spot of, all right, my constituents are saying both things.
Here, let me give you another example along those lines. The scooters.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So I get to travel for various reasons, and in a lot of cities, there's the scooters. And so for years before we got scooters here in Grand Forks, I'd been seeing them laying around in cities, parked outside of coffee shop doors and just left around like that. So I wasn't particularly excited about scooters coming. And there were people who came to council and said, keep those scooters out of our community. They're going to be laying around. Sure. And I was inclined to feel the same way. But we had the UND student government come to us and tell us, as representatives of 13,000 members of our community,
this is what we're hearing.
This is what we want. We want scooters. And we had told them that if this is what student government wants, then we will work toward that. And even though I might not have wanted scooters, I voted in favor of scooters, and I think it was the right thing.
Yeah. Those that like them really. You go downtown, they're used all the time.
Yes,
used all the time.
Yeah.
All right. So you were first elected in 2012.
Yes.
Here's some fun things that happened or launched or started in 2012. So I was raised. You were raised, right? Well, maybe not. You said you were a hitchhiker for a little bit, but I was raised. Don't trust anyone on the internet, and don't get in a car with a stranger. Well, in 2012, Lyft was launched, where you go on the internet to find a stranger to give you a ride.
In their car.
In their car.
Yes.
So 2012, Lyft launched.
Okay.
Queen Elizabeth, it was her Diamond Jubilee in 2012. 2012 was Diamond Jubilee. We've talked about this on the show. You have Canadian heritage. In 2012, they stopped producing the penny.
The penny, yes.
Yep. Now, so when did the loony and the toonie start? I kind of remember that.
So I left. I don't have Canadian heritage. I grew up there, but I was born in the U.S. Yeah, I always say I'm half Canadian, so you're not wrong to say Canadian heritage. I left in '76, and I think we were still using paper ones in '76. So sometime in between there, that's quite a gap. But I don't know when the loony.
I want to
really
say late
caught on.
80s, early 90s.
sounds right.
I could be wrong on that, but people watching the show will comment on that one.
Loonies and toonies. Yeah.
So in Facebook, in 2012, really, pounded their chest. We've reached 1 billion users. Do you know how many they're at right now?
I'm guessing it's 5 or 6 times that.
Yeah, a little over 3, just over 3 billion.
I
No, we're talking a
overguessed it.
billion.
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 With a B.
Yeah,
Okay.
with a B. That's a big one. Bret, thank you for being a guest on the show.
Yes.
I think you've been on 3-4 times.
I don't know.
Something like
I
that.
don't
But this will be your last as a council member. Who knows? Maybe I'll reach out to you.
600 council meetings and a few of these and a few other meetings along the way.
Yep.
Yeah.
For those that aren't aware, we are re-upping. We're going to do this podcast for another year, so we're going to keep talking to
Congrats.
people.
This has been a great thing. Thanks for doing this, John.
We're thinking we're going to expand it to, or maybe include some city staff and stuff as
that's a wonderful
things that are
idea.
going
Yes,
on and
yes.
stuff like that. But Bret, thank you. Do you get a break? Or do you teach through the summer?
Ours is a year-round program, so we have pretty much as many classes and students in the summer as we do in the spring and fall. But it's a different vibe. It's easier to get a parking place on campus in the summer. So, yeah.
Hey, do you know what? Not being on council, you don't have to talk about parking anymore.
But I work on a university campus, and so parking is something. It's the most efficient part of the university is the parking.
Is the parking?
Yes,
there you go. Bret, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for everything over the years, John. Thank you.
Appreciate it. And thank you to everybody for watching this episode of the City Chatter podcast. If you want to catch this episode or previous episodes, go to grandforksgov.com/podcasts, and we'll catch you next time. We'll come back in July. We'll have a new council then. We'll be talking budgets, but we're going to take a little bit of break here as we get the new council sworn in on July 1st. Thanks for joining us, everybody.